Hello everyone, welcome to Learning Royal. Today we'll be covering Python Basic Week 3. Today's agenda. First, we're going to learn about compiling errors/bugs, types of bugs, debugging, and then we're going to complete the assignment of the day. So first, let's begin. Compiling errors/bugs. So compiling errors, as you might have guessed, and those are the errors which you have in your code that your compiler has while compiling your code, while running your code. So, and this is usually for Python and other languages, your compiler, which in our case is idle, shows the line and type of error. So, these are also known as bugs. So, let me show you an example. So, we have a sample file. This is tutorial3.py. Now what we're gonna do, let's say we have, this is a normal print command, okay, which would display hello world, right? Now let's say that we had syntax wrong, like for example, we forgot to write the, quotation marks. Well, this would result in an error, and let's see what happens. Well, it's an invalid syntax right there. And this is what sometimes happens when the compiler detects your error before, before even seeing anything. But let's see something else. Instead of print, if we misspell print as printay, it's gonna run, but it's gonna say traceback most recent call last, and this is an error basically. We know that because it's in red. It says line 1, and this whatever file line 1 in module, and this and this is the line. It shows that, and then it also shows the type of error, which we'll discuss later. And it says name print is not defined. Okay, so let's just go back to normal print. Now we'll go back to here. So as we saw, there were types of bugs. So there are a few types of bugs. The first type of bug is syntax. When there's something wrong in the syntax in this type of bug. Well, usually, compilers like idle usually tell you that there's a syntax error before you even compiling your code. So we don't really care much about this. Plus, this is not, very frequent. I would say that the few frequent ones would be type in maybe name because of spelling. But syntax, and if you're experienced, you're not trying something out new, you're gonna be fine with that. Name. When you use a variable or function or anything else that does not exist. I didn't specify function or anything, but for example, you're using a function, say print, but you use printay instead, like we used printay. It won't work. It would say name error. And then type, when you use wrong parameters in functions. This is like a syntax error, because if you saw in our print thing, when we took out the quotation marks, it already gave us a syntax. It says syntax error. There's an error in your syntax, so that's also a type error. But basically, when you use some wrong parameters in functions or other kind of things, then it's a type error. So finally, there's runtime error. Runtime error is basically the rest of the errors combined. Those are null errors, like if a value you wanted to print had no value, and dividing by 0, if you divide a number by 0, it's undefined, but Python doesn't know that actually. And then memory error, which is when you run out of memory while running a program. So these are types of bugs. Then let's talk about debugging. This is the term for fixing your code. Well, there are 4 usual types which you can use: automatic debugging, print debugging, scope debugging, and rubber duck debugging. All these 4 types are useful, even though I prefer rubber duck, and you will see why. So automatic debugging. If you want to debug automatically, like you're very lazy, use this code. This is the exact code in these 2 lines, not the 3rd line. When you use this code, just make sure, usually you should only use this when you're lazy and you probably did some syntax debugging and you have a long file, you don't want to search through it. This is really not recommended since usually it leaves mistakes. It only fixes the syntax and all that. So it's that type of debugging. Now there's print debugging. So print command debugging. This is also known as print command debugging. Why? Because you have to use the print command. If any command is taking a long time to run, you might want to use this command to figure out which statement is taking the time. So for this, you can say that we have a print statement after each line to see where the code is stuck. This is not recommended for long programs I'm saying right now, because it's going to slow down your program even further and you're not going to be able to find which line. So, for example, you have a few lines, okay? You put a print command after each and every line. If, let's say the first print command is print 1, then print 2, print 3, etc. So, after, if you get stopped on print 2, when there are 3 print commands in total, from print 1 to print 3, then you know that the third line is taking too long, and that's why it's not letting print 3 load. So that's how print debugging is useful. Then there's scope debugging. It's like print debugging, but instead of checking the flow, it checks the info. It's the same thing as print debugging. It's recommended for info errors, meaning that the information being displayed is not the same as the information you want being displayed. For example, I ran into this problem a few days later while making a program. The problem was that I had this variable d, for example, which at first I, wrote as a string, which was, for example, just any random string. I'm gonna write any random characters. And then, like, way later in the program, I renamed the character way later in the program. Not rename, I thought of using the character again, but didn't realize that it was already being used. And I named it as a boolean. Not boolean, I think I named it as a non-type variable. Now the problem is when I said print d, you'll see what happens. It prints none. And I thought, well, it can't be that the string has nothing in there, because I was sure that I put something in the string. And then I found this this d is here, and then I changed this variable to another one. So that's like the scope debugging. Finally, we have rubber duck debugging. So this is for long problems, which you cannot solve with print debugging because it's going to take a long time. So you have to try explaining your code to something or someone. The something or someone can be anything. It can even be yourself. So, for example, you have some code, and you have a few print statements, a few functions. You go over each one of the lines and you read it out to yourself. You try to understand what's happening. Like you're a third person reading the code for the first time. That's like a rubber duck debugging. The name of rubber duck debugging can be a little confusing because, you might not expect a rubber duck to do anything with debugging, but it's named so because the programmer who introduced this used a rubber duck as something to explain the code to. So that explains why this is called rubber duck debugging. This is, I prefer this one most because while I make programs, usually it turns out to be a long program, and print debugging doesn't necessarily solve the problem of the flow or the error. The error is usually solved by this because then I understand what I'm doing wrong. So this is a sample error. Try to figure out the error. Take 2 seconds. Okay, let's discuss. So if you might have noticed, we have print line 1. This is fine. Ignore the capitals, okay? The capitals are one problem because the print must be in lowercase. And the second line, same. Print line 2. That's fine. except the P, capital P. And here, print line 3, that's also fine. Here, print line 4, that's fine. There, everything here is fine. Print line 1. Now, you might have mistaken here. You might have read print instead of pertin. Well, there is a spelling mistake. That's a name error. So that's the error. There are two errors, all in the capital letters, and pertin instead of print. That's the error in this one. Now a fact about functions. This is very useful because when you get to functions, you if you make a functions and then you expect them to run. For example, this is a function called main, which has the print hello world string, and then but it only prints guru99, which is just like a testing function. So why only guru99 gets printed out? Well, because the function wasn't called. If the function, which is titled main, was called, only then hello world would have been printed out. So that's a fact about functions when you learn about them. Now, assignment of the day. Try to figure out, the bugs in this code and fix them. I'll give you 2 seconds. So the bug in this one, let's read it out carefully. So you have from datetime, import datetime. That is good. We have now equals datetime.now. And that's also good if you check. Now we have print. First we have a problem in the print statement itself. We don't have, and the brackets. Not the brackets. We don't have the parentheses around these strings, except we might get tricked because we already have parentheses after the percent sign. That's one problem. Let's read the string. So %02D, meaning the first 2 digits of the month, okay? The first 2 digits of the day, that's also fine. First 2 digits of the year. This is where it gets confusing. Because the first 2 digits of, the current year 2020, it will just be 20. Well, it will work for 2020. Let's say we're already there next year at 2021. It's gonna just say 20, which is the wrong year. It's gonna say 20 for any number, for any year in the 21st century. So we should change that to %040 or percent negative whatever, or the last 2 digits, but not the first 2 digits. Those are the 2 errors in this assignment of the day. Thank you for watching this video. Please make sure to like, share, and subscribe. Thank you.